If you'd like to talk about your own Bigfoot encounter, or if you're looking for help from a Bigfoot investigator in your area, email me at bigfootcrossroads@gmail.com. No Sasquatch were harmed in the recording of this podcast. Welcome to Bigfoot Crossroads.
Thank you, Matt.
A fellow Okie.
Yeah.
You listen to the show.
Yes.
And you listened well enough that you had noticed that I had mentioned some things about some paranormal activity in my house and growing up and stuff. And you said something about it in the comments on the YouTube channel. And we've kind of been talking ever since. It's kind of funny, though, because unbeknownst to yourself, recently I had Randy Harrington on the show, and he actually told me a story about you. And I didn't know it was about you until we started talking.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You basically grew up in an area near a place that I used to investigate on a regular basis, and had what you call a possible encounter. I say it's a Bigfoot encounter. Along a certain creek at a different location than where I used to investigate at with the creek specifically. Mm-hmm. But if you don't mind, let's just get started and just kind of tell me all about that.
Okay. So what happened was my brother told me a story, and he said, somebody, and I cannot recall who it was, but it was somebody we knew. Somebody's, this has been years ago, okay? So I can't remember all the details, but I don't remember who told him the story, but somebody told him that there was an old monkey woman that guarded an Indian, now we say Native American, but back then it was Indian graveyard, and that she hung out in the trees above the graveyard, around the graveyard. And if people came down and they were messing around in that graveyard, that cemetery, she was the guardian. She jumped down out of the trees and chased them off. And I thought it was a funny story, but my brother thought it was a scary story, and he believed it. So I don't recall if the person that was telling him the story said they saw the monkey woman, but of course, all kids in small towns, they say they saw all kinds of things.
Right. My cousin saw it.
I forget all the different ones we used to have, but there were all kinds of little, critters and demons and, and ghosts and stuff that, yeah. So it was a good way to get your girlfriend or boyfriend out to go, necking, basically is what it was. So I thought that's what it was. I thought that it was one of those stories, and I thought it was funny, but he thought it was scary. So I don't even know. I don't recall if I don't think, knowing my brother, I don't think he talked me into it. I think I talked him into it, probably. But I thought it would be fun to go check that place out. I thought it would be scary. It'd be fun, And one night after church, there were some kids that went to church with us. We decided we were all going to go out there and go check out, see if we could go see the monkey woman.
Go look for the monkey woman.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think there were 2 cars of us, and we drove out in the country. Now I know where this location is. At the time, I didn't care. I wasn't driving. I knew I knew where the road we took and turned off of to get there, but that's all I knew. I didn't know exactly which road we turned on. I didn't care. But we drove down a country road, and there were trees everywhere, and we pulled up to this parking lot that had the Indian church so the cemetery was for the congregation people that died from that particular church. And it was an old church. I suppose it's been there my guess from the way I remember it, that church had probably been there from the early 1900s or so. I think nowadays it might be new, or they built onto it or something. But back then it was just a little like one room church, and there was a street light in the parking lot. When the parking lot was just a little gravel, parking lot. But we parked the cars there, and we all piled out of the cars. And some of the kids that, like my brother and some of the other kids were older than me, and they smoked. I didn't smoke, and my girlfriend that came, she didn't smoke. They stayed up the cars. They were smoking, I guess, to prepare themselves to go down, and check out the monkey woman, because they probably had to get their courage or something. But
right.
we went down to where the opening was. There was a pathway that you could see. There was like grass on either side, and the grass was about, with me standing there, I would say it was about maybe just below my chin, so maybe my shoulder level or so. And we were standing down there, and we were just, my friend and I were talking, and we could hear something rustling around. And so we had this tall grass, but behind the tall grass, there were trees. So it was like a forest back there. And it was trees and just thick growth, because it was just wild. We heard something rustling. So I put my finger up to my lips, and I looked at her like to tell her to be quiet, because I thought there was a raccoon or an armadillo or something, some little critter probably scurrying around in the brush and everything. And I'd been out in the country a lot, and I'd been around wildlife a lot, and I liked animals. So I told her to be quiet, and we just listened. And we listened as it rustled around. It seemed like it was just rustling around. And I just stood there and looked at her, and she was looking at me. And we could hear it was getting closer. And so all of a sudden, right in front of me, above that grass, something popped up. And I would say, like, I'm looking right now in this room I'm in, and I'm thinking about the distance between me and it. And so the way I'm remembering it, the distance was about, I'm sitting at a desk, and there's a chair over there across from me. I would say it was about probably maybe 6 foot away from me.
Wow. That ain't far.
Well, but I'm thinking right now, like, I thought I could reach out, and I think I could have reached out and touched it had I leaned forward really far, but not just reached out. Like, so I'm looking at my arm thinking that's about 3.5. Well, I don't know. Anyway, I'd say 6 feet or 5 feet maybe in front of me, popped up about the same height as me. Well, I could tell from looking at whatever or whoever it was. It was not any other. It wasn't a deer. Okay, I know what a deer looks like, and it looked like a person, except it didn't look like a person. I couldn't see the face. Wish I could tell you I could. That would make a lot better story, but I can't. That would be a lie. What I saw was what looked like hair, and I know people have hair. Okay, I know that. It looked like shaggy hair on both sides, and it was only, I'm telling you, it was only like pop up long enough for me to scream, because it scared the crap out of me, because it surprised me, because I was expecting like an armadillo or something. Popped up. I think I screamed. I don't even remember for sure if it was a scream or if I yelled help, or I don't even know what I did. I just know I did something. I made a noise because it scared me. And then it jumped down like it was up, and I yelled. It was down, and then it was running so fast. And my brother and his friends came as soon as I yelled or whatever I did, scream or whatever I did. They were running down, trying to chase. They could hear it too. I mean, him or whatever it was, person, whatever. They could hear it running, and it sounded like it was like crashing through. But it sounded like it was pretty damn fast. My brother ran down. I remember him just jumping in there and trying to get through and trying to chase whoever or whatever it was. And there was no way. And it was just too thick. My brother was fast. So had it not been thick in there, he might have been, I'm pretty sure. I know he came from a few yards away, but my brother was fast. So he probably could have caught somebody that was just an average person. Mm-hmm. Unless they hid very well or something. Maybe they stopped and hid. What do I know? He couldn't get to them. And then he came back out, and the guys that were with him, they couldn't find anybody. All I knew was it gave me a funny feeling that it wasn't a person. And I can't even tell you why, other than that hair didn't look like a person's hair. It didn't look like, I can't tell you why. I really can't. I honestly cannot tell you. But it did seem awfully odd too, that I'm thinking it was pitch dark, okay, except for that street light. So I don't think that anybody was going to be out there in those woods, just so happened to be out there when we got there. Why would they be there? We didn't even know it's not like we announced we were going to go there to anybody just right after church we decided. So it wasn't like we told people, hey, we're going to go out here. And so they could have been out there waiting on us or anything.
Right.
Anyway, so whatever. So after that happened, then we all kind of got back together and, shook it off. And then we did go down to the cemetery to go see the monkey woman, but we never did see the monkey woman. We didn't see anything. We saw some tombstones and then we left. Well, the next day, I couldn't get it off my mind. It was just so weird to me. The next day, I was talking to my mom and I told my mom about it. I said, and I wasn't thinking Bigfoot. Okay. I just didn't know what that was. I didn't know what happened. And I was talking to my mom about it and I described what happened. She said, you saw a Bigfoot. I said, a Bigfoot? First of all, I'd never heard anybody where this happened, where I lived. I'd never heard one person say anything about Bigfoot in our area. Never. And I can't believe it because, I can't believe people weren't talking about it. But maybe they were afraid to. I don't know. I'd never heard one person talk about Bigfoot in our area. But I said, Bigfoot? I don't know about that. She said, yeah, but I said, but Mom, I said, he was only like about as tall as I am. She said, they're not like born big. They have kids and they have to grow up. She said, you probably saw a kid Bigfoot. She said, where your grandmother grew up, it was down by the Boggy Creek area. So isn't there like a Boggy Depot or something?
Sure
the depot play. Okay. My grandmother grew up around there. And so my mom had heard stories from not that my grandmother said she saw one, mm-hmm. but my grandmother said she knew people that saw one. But I'd never heard anybody talk about a Bigfoot anywhere in our area. Then later, now this is what kills me. So this was not that long ago. So like about maybe just a couple or 3 months ago, I'm thinking it was. All of a sudden, I thought, the old monkey woman. Could she have been a Bigfoot? That's possible. And I didn't know, I'd never heard that Bigfoot could go up a tree. So I'd never heard those stories before until recently in the last year. It's the first time I ever heard that. I thought, what if she was what if she wasn't even just a story?
Yeah.
What if she was a Bigfoot old lady?
Somebody just trying to describe what they saw.
Yeah. But that never even occurred to me until just recently. It's possible, I guess.
I live in Tulsa. We're not going to give away specific locations or anything. I'm sure some people that listen to the show religiously will be able to figure out some things. But I'm a pretty good ways from this location. And I ended up in the exact same area within a half mile looking for these things, all those years later because of people seeing them right along that creek that you knew nothing about. That leads right to that location. I mean, I think it's just, it's a small world, but damn, is it really that small?
What kills me is how come I never heard any of these stories when I lived there? Never. I really didn't even until just a few years ago. I don't even remember the first time I heard a story from there. And then I was like, dang. I mean, I used to hang out in the same place you're talking about that you saw. I mean, because I've heard your story recently. I used to hang out there at dark in the night.
I mean, I don't know. It's weird because first off, growing up, Bigfoot wasn't even on my radar for a thing in Oklahoma. I was definitely interested in this stuff at a very early age, but it was always stories about the Pacific Northwest, and I never even thought about this area. I didn't see Legend of Boggy Creek. I didn't know anything about that stuff until I started looking into the subject on the internet. But I ended up meeting up with people, and the very first time I ever in my life met up with anybody to go actively look for Bigfoot in the state of Oklahoma, that's exactly where we went. I mean, that was my first introduction, and ultimately became a prime investigation area for myself, a place where I had encounters, where I had a sighting, met numerous other people that had sightings there. I've heard many stories from the area, but I couldn't tell you anything about the history of the area beyond the people that I knew and the stories that they had heard. I never heard, you don't run across old accounts of them being in that area or anything, but it seems like a lot of the locals down there just know about them. They've always been there, but then a lot of people in that location still have no clue that they're there or that people see them or report seeing them or anything else. It's really kind of strange.
I think I told you, but I can't remember if I did or not, but my best friend from there, her dad was park ranger. And I've asked her, did he ever tell you anything like that there were stories or anything? She said she doesn't remember ever hearing any. But now that, I've heard so many people talk about park rangers don't talk about it. So I have to think he would have to have heard things. He worked there for 20 something years. And he was night shift person. Like he didn't get home till 2:30 in the morning from working there.
Yeah.
He'd have to have heard stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
But he's deceased now, so I can't even ask him. I wish I could.
I knew a park ranger that worked there that would let us into locations that were closed off to the general public so we could go look for stuff, look for footprints and stuff. It's just kind of crazy. And there's even, you might be familiar with this. It's a small community, not a lot of people. So they will print in the newspaper the police dispatch calls in the area.
Because that's the big excitement.
Yeah. See who went to jail, got thrown in the drunk tank the weekend, And there's been a couple times whenever calls came in from the park down there saying, one guy was walking the trails at night and got attacked by a gorilla. That's what he reported. Some sort of gorilla attacked him, knocked him down on the trail and took off through the woods. Another woman was hit by something as she came out of one of the bathrooms there in the campgrounds. She said all she remembers is walking out of the bathroom and a big hairy arm knocked her down. And something big took off running. I was standing there one time whenever another group of campers came over. The park ranger that I was talking about earlier was actually at our camp talking to us, and another group of campers came over and reported an incident with her while we were standing there. Now, they didn't call it a Bigfoot. So, I mean, I don't know. I know what I saw. I know what other people have told me. And it just really struck me as interesting that your incident happened right along the same creek that so many stories come from.
Well, what I find interesting is that I lived there until I moved away when I was 18. Never heard one thing. So I've heard all the stories. I didn't hear not one person down there ever told me anything.
Wow.
And I cannot believe that because everybody knew me. I can't believe they didn't tell me anything. Not one thing.
But it's also kind of interesting that whenever you told your mom, that was the first thing that came out of her mouth.
I was surprised.
I mean, what do you even say as a kid? Like, Mom, are you all right? Like, what are you talking about?
No, I mean, I thought it was funny that that was what she thought. That's what she came up with, you know?
Yeah.
But my mom, she was a nice person. My mom she knew I wasn't crazy. She knew I didn't make up, stories. And I think she truly believed what she just said to me,
Uh-huh.
It was probably Bigfoot. She said a kid, like a kid or one of their children or something. I don't remember how she put it. She didn't say juvenile like everybody does nowadays.
Right. The scientific term, juvenile.
Right. Yeah.
So you had that incident happen to you. So how did you end up, listening to my podcast? You're getting ready to go on an outing, apparently.
Yes, that's how I did. Because, there's somebody that I also got in contact with because of all that activity in the same place that you're talking about. Because I knew somebody from my hometown over Facebook told me some stories. And then I actually went and visited with him there. And he told me more stories in person and said, hey, if you wanted to, I could take you out and you're probably going to see something or hear something. You'll have something happen probably. And I wanted to, but we never did it. So I just started, because of my conversations with this person, I started it was just recently, really. I really didn't start listening to anything until this is so silly, but I am not really big into like every technology thing that comes out, everybody jumps on it and starts getting all into it. And I'm the last person. So YouTube, I never did.
YouTube?
That's silly.
That's the old one.
I know, but hey, it might be old, but that I started doing YouTube like about, I'd say a little over a year ago.
Oh, wow.
I'm serious, okay?
You were the last one. It was you this whole time holding out.
And I'm still doing it too. So I listen to YouTube while I'm working. So anyway, I started listening I just went in one day and put in Bigfoot, I put in Bigfoot and it brought up something which led to something else, which led to something else, which, and on and on and on. So then I started hearing this guy telling a story, and I knew before he even said the name of the place, I knew exactly where he was talking about, and I knew who he was talking about. And so I contacted him and I said, hey, I'm from there and I know that person. And I knew your story because I heard your story before you even said it, before I heard it on the program on YouTube when you were telling it. So when I heard you start telling it, I knew it was you. I just thought that was so funny. So started talking to him. Well, he is the person that's going to be doing an outing there coming up really soon, in March, first week of March. Second week of March.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go.
How exciting. Your first one.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I know it's been a long time And I know there have been changes there. So I know it's likely that, maybe there's nothing there anymore. I don't know, but I'm going to go. Because if there's something there and something happens, I want to be there. I want to hear it or see it. I said, wake me up. If I go to sleep, because I probably won't be able to go to sleep, especially maybe the first night. But if I go to sleep and something starts happening, I want somebody to wake me up first thing. Because I want to hear it for myself. I'm not saying I want to walk up and, make friends or anything. I'm just saying I want to witness it. Because I do truly believe there are those creatures. I believe it. I just want to see it for myself. And this time, if I do, I want to actually see more than just an outline of hair and then hear it running, Oh, and that's something I wanted to tell you. I wonder about this. I heard the rustling, and I hear him thinking it's a small animal or something coming up. I didn't think of this till recently. I think I told you I thought of this, but I wonder now, because I never ever had heard stories about them being on all fours and then standing up. Well, you know how he popped up? I wonder if he was like crawling in, because he could hear I'm sure he could hear the kids talking up there. If it was, I'm saying if it was a Bigfoot, okay? If. Would they maybe crawl in first and then pop up to look? I mean, that's a possibility. I never heard about them being on all fours until I started listening to podcasts and stuff,
That requires a conversation involving speculation and theory and opinion.
Right.
And
it is all.
Yeah.
I know.
But I can tell you, how should I put it? I'm always worried about watching what I say exactly, because,
I know.
I understand the nature of the beast and everything whenever it comes to this subject and subjects like this. But I'll just speak from my own experiences, which I rarely do. Yeah. But yeah, absolutely. They will crawl in as low to the ground as they can possibly get, and get right up close to you before they ever really reveal themselves or get into a position that might give them away.
Yeah.
We've had situations where they crawled right up on the vehicles that we were sitting in at the time. People have had them crawl in on their stomachs right up to camp and everything else. So it wouldn't surprise me at all. The situation that you're talking about specifically, it may have not known that you and your friend were there, and it was working its way towards the larger group of people, belly crawling in.
Yeah, because we were being quiet.
Yeah. So,
and still,
it might have been sneaking up on everybody, and then kind of stood up to get a better vantage point, and it scared you, and you probably scared the crap out of it too.
He probably ran home and said, "Mom,
yeah,
I don't know, but I stood up and there was a thing, and it was just looking at me."
And the size and everything kind of supports the idea of, like, a creature that may have not had as much experience or wisdom in being around humans and just really wanted to see one.
Yeah.
And was trying to take advantage of the situation, but got caught slipping because it's not used to sneaking up on people. And,
yeah,
and maybe Monkey Woman is Mama, and that's who everybody have been seeing. Who knows?
I think she's probably Grandma.
Maybe so.
The old Monkey Woman. Who knows?
We found tracks on that creek. I have one sitting a few feet away from me. We found tracks. One set was, if I remember correctly, 14 inches long and about 8 inches wide, I think. And then another set was roughly around 11 or 12 inches and about 4 to 6 inches wide. And then another set was 7 inches long and about 4 inches wide. And then the track that I have right next to me is 5 inches long and about 3.5 inches wide. And we found all these tracks together. They were fresh down in that creek bed in 50-degree weather in September. Not this past year or anything, but at the time. So the idea of a group of humans being out there with their toddlers and children barefoot in this creek in 50-degree weather is ridiculous in September.
Yeah.
Because the area that I would investigate where this creek was, the creek eventually works its way to a lake. And this section before you get to the lake is a public hunting area. So not a place you would take your kids to play in the creek at by any means.
Yeah.
So there's that. I never saw anything down there. That was the location where I've heard something talking in the middle of the woods in the middle of the night with nobody around. And I've heard quite a few stories from that area where people did see them. It was kind of a famous area, to be honest, in that general region, because this area kind of had a reputation for being really scary at night. And even the locals wouldn't stay the night down there. Nobody would want to stay down there overnight. And anytime we went down there, it just had a really creepy vibe at nighttime for some reason, compared to other places that we'd go at nighttime. But it was definitely creepy at night. I didn't like being down there at night at all. The creek was fine during the day, but once it got dark, it kind of took on a whole new atmosphere. Well, you said you never heard anything about Bigfoot in the area growing up there.
Yeah. Nothing.
Did you hear anything about the Lady of the Lake?
Oh, heck yeah.
Okay. Well, can we talk about that? Because I want to hear some of those stories.
Okay.
Because I've spent a lot of time at that lake looking for her, and I never saw her.
I was there a few times looking too. Yeah, that was one of the ones I was talking about, that, they have stories that get you to go down and sit in a car and, wait to see this thing. And the next thing you know, you're kissing. Okay. So Lady of the Lake, this is all I know about it. I just knew, because I got told and got taken there, that there was a lady that was in a dress. I don't remember if it was a white dress. I don't remember that part. I think it was a white dress. And she supposedly would be basically walking on the water, and she glowed. And I can't remember the exact story, but she, of course, drowned in the lake somehow.
Right.
I just don't remember. I don't remember the details of why she drowned in the lake, but I think it had something to do with, was it a murder? Or I don't remember if it was a suicide or a murder. But yes, the ghost, the Lady of the Lake. Yeah. Everybody knew about the Lady of the Lake.
But
I never saw her.
Did anybody ever actually see her?
I don't know.
I mean, that's like,
I didn't.
That's a really famous ghost story from Oklahoma.
I know.
Like, the first time I heard about it was back in the old ghost hunting days. I read about it on a website before I had ever been down there or knew anybody from the area or anything. But I've never ran across anybody that saw her.
No, I don't know. I don't personally know anybody that said they saw her. That's one of those things that I think was made up just to get you go out and go,
yeah,
make out.
Yeah.
I don't think that one was real, but I don't know that for a fact. I don't know that it's not real. I know I didn't see anything.
But one of the things that I do find interesting about it is people talking about hearing the Lady of the Lake, that's part of the urban legend or whatever. And that is one of the spots we would go because of the Bigfoot sightings that people had down there.
So when they said they heard the Lady of the Lake, what'd they say they heard?
Just like a crying or a wailing, just the typical crybaby bridge type stuff that, every Oklahoman knows about.
Right. And every town has that too, by the way, don't they?
Yeah, pretty much.
Every town has a crybaby bridge. Ooh, I think we had a woolly booger. Did you ever hear that story? Woolly booger?
I always thought a woolly booger was a Bigfoot, so no.
Oh no, really? Are you serious?
Yeah.
The woolly booger was supposed to be a little short thing. My brother told me that story. My oldest brother. Woolly booger was supposed to be this little short hairy thing. Oh, hairy. What if it was a little baby Bigfoot? Because he said that Woolly Booger was little, and you go out to a certain place and the Woolly Booger would run around and chase you or whatever. I heard that was a story, but I never thought about a baby Bigfoot. Maybe that's what it's supposed to be.
Maybe so.
I always thought it was just a joke. I just would laugh.
So after we started talking, we kind of veered off to the subject of the paranormal a bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was pleasantly surprised in some of the stories you told me. I understand kind of being on the fence, not really knowing if you saw a Bigfoot or not, but whenever it comes to paranormal stuff, you've got quite the history.
Yeah. And sometimes I think a lot of things happen to me because maybe, I don't know, maybe it's because I actually do pay attention, or is it because I really don't know. I don't know if they're attracted to me, or if it's just that I pay attention and so I notice and maybe somebody else doesn't notice. Maybe I see or not necessarily see. Usually I don't see anything. Usually I might hear something or feel something that somebody else might not hear or feel because they're not paying attention, maybe. I don't know. But yeah, I've had a lot of things. Not a lot of big things, but a lot of things collectively. You know what I mean?
Yeah. We've talked pretty extensively about our experiences, the stuff that I've experienced in my own home growing up and everything, and your stuff.
Yeah.
And I agree with you that I think there's sometimes it seems like the person, and I know with me personally, I've experienced things in my own home and then I've experienced things in other people's homes. And it's just like, okay, well, how much is too much? Like I've had a Bigfoot sighting. I've had all these ghost experiences. I've seen something that would technically classify as a UFO. I've seen things that I don't even have a name for. And I'm going to be completely honest. There's been times where I've thought, is it even possible? Am I just imagining these things? Is there something wrong with me? But then you have these experiences like you're talking about where I'm not the only one that's experienced things in this house.
Right.
I'm not the only one that saw Bigfoot. People were with me that saw Bigfoot at the same time as me. So were we all hallucinating the same thing? I mean, that's not possible. My cousin was with me whenever I saw the UFO. So I don't know if that's it or not. Surely it can't be if other people are experiencing the same things in the same locations. And then you start thinking, well, okay, is there something, for some reason, why am I able to see this stuff whenever other people, is there something special about me? But again, other people have experiences in the same locations.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't really know what it is. And maybe it's a combination of all the above. I don't know. It's just so weird to me. And I know I'm rambling and going off in a tangent, but there are a lot of similarities in people's stories that have these type of experiences. And like you, for instance, there is a remarkable amount of similarities between you and I. There's things that we've talked about, just mundane items that I haven't even mentioned or pointed out, where it's like, wow, that's almost the same as my story. That's almost the same thing that happened to me. And I can't help but think that all of this stuff is somehow connected. And if there's something connected, maybe it's something that just our science hasn't been able to measure yet. I don't know what the connection is, but that has been my task for the past year, is listening to all these stories and talking to people about these things and going into areas outside of Bigfoot to try and find these connections. But one of the things, that you mentioned is you started having experiences at a very early age. during childhood.
Mm-hmm.
And you're still having experiences now as an adult later in life.
Yes.
I mean, you did say you were older than me. Keep that in mind. But
and I'll always be older than you.
But I mean, if you don't mind sharing with the listeners, I know you've already shared with me, but kind of take us through how all of this started for you.
I would say the first things I remember happened in a one house that I lived in my hometown. And there wasn't much there. Mostly at that house, mostly it was a feeling of there's somebody that's seeing me and I can't see them.
Mm-hmm.
Like that was most of what happened in that house. But a couple of little weird things. And I know there could be other explanations, okay, other than a ghost. But one particular thing, this is just back to the very beginning, okay? So in that house, I always felt like somebody was watching me, but that was there. Nothing was really happening. But one time my mom was sitting on the couch, and it's broad daylight. We had animals, and one of my cats walked by and was just walking by casually, and suddenly turned, looked at the couch, like right next to my mother, and started bowing its back up, and its hair came up on its back, and it was hissing, like that, just freaking out. My mom looked at the cat, and I looked at the cat, and my mom looked at me, and and then the cat hissed a few times and then kind of walked off, and my mom's like, oh my gosh. I mean, she was sitting there right where the cat was looking, and it kind of freaked her out. She just looked at me and said, like, I don't know, I don't remember exactly what she said, but like, well, he acted like he just saw somebody sitting next to me or something, and I'm like, yeah. And I lived right next door to a church, and my dad was a preacher, and I would be in that church by myself a lot because I practiced piano in there. And so this is the parsonage is right next to the church. So the parsonage where I always felt like somebody was watching me. Then I'd go over to the church to go practice, and I'd take my cats and my dogs with me because I didn't want to be in there by myself. And they'd be walking around and sitting with me and everything. And one of those cats, not the same cat, but one of my cats did that same thing, looked up at the pulpit in the church. So the pulpit was there was a little stage, just a little step up, and then the pulpit. The cat did the same thing, but it was a different cat. Hissed, bowed his back, hissed, and was staring up up into the direction as if there was a person standing behind the pulpit, which really freaked me out. Because my dad was a preacher, and then I'm thinking, I knew there were some older guys that had used to, preach at that church that were dead. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, is there a dead preacher following me in here when I'm practicing? The dead preacher's hanging out.
Why is that so creepy?
That is the creepiest.
I mean, it shouldn't be, but it is.
That is so creepy. And, so he's probably a very nice guy, but I don't want a ghost preacher hanging out when I'm practicing in church. So that scared me. Well, just a few things happened around that. Not anything. I never saw anything, nothing like that. Then we moved to another house. Before we even moved in, I loved that house. That house was awesome. It was an old house, and it was 2-story, and I fell in love with it. And the church bought that house, and we were going to move into it. And so it needed some things done to it. It had, you remember the popcorn ceiling stuff?
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And the sparkly popcorn ceiling stuff. It had sparkles. Well, believe it or not, we wanted that. So that was in the day when that was popular. Okay. Well, this house didn't have it. So they were going to, shoot that stuff up onto the ceiling. I was there when they were doing part of it. And I was, oh, that's great. That's beautiful. Love it. So they were putting the popcorn ceiling stuff up, and they were cleaning the house and anything that needed to be fixed a little bit. It was old. They weren't going to like totally redo it, but everybody was cleaning and fixing. And when we were doing those things, a couple of things happened. We had a tornado siren go off one day, and there were a few of us at the house I don't even remember what I was doing. I was probably playing, but people were cleaning things, and the siren went off, and we all went into the basement, which was cool because hardly any house, really not that many houses in Oklahoma have a basement.
Yeah.
Some of the older houses do, but because of the water table, people don't really have basements around where I live because, it's too wet. It just causes problems. But this house had one, and everybody came running down the stairs, and we went to hide while we waited for the tornado to go through or whatever it was going to do. It didn't go through our town. It went on the outside of town and actually did kill some people I knew on the outside of town, that particular tornado. But when we were down in the basement, the adults were kind of gathered in one spot, and the kids we were gathered in another spot. And I told you this before, it's kind of funny, but there was a big box down there that was in the shape like it could have held a coffin.
Right.
It could have held a coffin. Like it could have been what a coffin got shipped in. So that's what we decided it was a box that used to hold a coffin, and it got shipped in that. We were sitting on that box, and the adults were talking. We clearly heard, me and a couple of my friends, steps upstairs, walking, and it was obvious it was on the hallway towards the kitchen. Well, I didn't think there should be anybody up there, probably. And the way I remember it, and I don't even know if this is true because it's been too many years, but the way I remember it is that my dad actually had locked the doors. So there was a front door and a back door. The way I remember it is the doors were locked. I don't know if that's really true.
Right.
But that's the way I remember the story. So there shouldn't be anybody in the house because we were all in the basement. So I say, "Hey, Daddy, there's somebody upstairs." And so he listened to me. I said, I heard steps. We heard. And the kids said, "Yes, we heard steps. Go to the kitchen." So my dad ran upstairs to go find somebody. And he went all through the house, and there was nobody there. Well, that was just the first thing. That was no big deal. That could have been a person, especially if the doors weren't locked, which I remember that they were, but doesn't make it so. So anyway, it's kind of spooky. And the next thing I remember is that a friend of mine that was helping clean the house she was there by herself, and she had gone to vacuum. We had a stairway in that house that you'd walk up this one set of stairs, and then you turn to your left and walk up another set, and they were all carpeted. So she vacuumed those stairs going up, went up to the second floor, and was about to plug in and vacuum that stairs. And she heard somebody, there was a swinging door down at the bottom. You would push open that swinging door and then go up those steps. Well, she heard the swinging door, and she thought somebody was coming there to help clean or whatever. And she heard somebody coming up the stairs, and she waited because she knew somebody was going to be there. Somebody was coming up the stairs, and she waited. And when the steps got to the top of the stairs, no one appeared. So it freaked her out, and she thought, "What do I do?" And her instinct told her, just plug the vacuum cleaner in and vacuum away and get the heck out of here. So she did. She continued to vacuum, and she wouldn't look back. She didn't want to see it. So she vacuumed, and then she ran down the stairs and left. And she said that freaked her out. She wasn't going to go back in there by herself ever again. So that was the first two things that happened. Well, then after that, we moved in. And I don't even remember when the first things happened. And I'm not going to go into all the stories, but just the typical stuff you hear people talk about really did happen in the house. Footsteps all the time, okay? And all I remember is the footsteps coming upstairs. That's what I never remember them going back down. I don't know if they did. I don't remember them ever going back down. But even my mother witnessed that one day with me, and I saw her, she heard it too. My mom didn't want to talk about these things. My dad was a preacher. He didn't believe in these things. And if he did, he wasn't going to say he did because
right.
Supposedly the Bible tells you, ain't such thing as ghosts. But then also there are stories in the Bible where there are ghosts, so I don't get that. But anyway, he didn't believe in ghosts, and or at least he said he didn't. And we couldn't talk to my dad about it. But my mom heard this the same time I heard it. Steps came up, and there was nobody there. And she witnessed it with me. That was just all the time, though. I mean, not all the time, but that was often. Mm-hmm. And then another thing that was often was you'd hear the water turn on. If I was downstairs, the water would turn on, not downstairs, but I could hear it turn on. You go upstairs and it wouldn't be on anymore. Or if you were upstairs, you'd hear it turn on downstairs. I never caught it on, though, I have to say. So we just heard it. I don't know. I never caught the water on. That was just, the things you hear people talk about, typical stuff.
Right.
But the things that were not so typical, and I have heard people say they heard somebody call out their name, but I don't like that. The only time I remember it happening to me was I was by myself in the house, and I was in the kitchen, and the kitchen had an ironing board that was in the wall, those little skinny ones that are up in the wall, and you can pull it down out of the wall. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Okay, they're built in. Some of the old houses had it. We had that in that kitchen. And I was ironing, and the kitchen was right by the back door, and it was nighttime. And I clearly heard my brother say, Beth, and like, knock, Beth, let me in. And I said, just a second, I'll be right there. And I, took care of the iron, and then I walked over there, walked to the door. He's not there. Nobody's there. And it wasn't that far to that door either. It was just like 10 feet, maybe. And I went to the door. Nobody's there. So the back of the house, if you walked out down those steps out of the back of the house, there's like 3 steps, I think it was, out the back door. Our driveway was off to the left. Like if I walked down there, I could see the driveway. There was not a car. I walked around. There's no car there. And my brother didn't live there at the time, so he was off at college. But I clearly heard my brother. And I looked. There's no car. I know, of course, that he could have pulled up and then left. I mean, that's physically possible. I went to the front of the house. There's nobody there. So I just went back in the house and just, continued. But the next time I talked to him, because he did not show up that night, the next time I talked to him, I said, this happened. Did you come to the house and then leave? No. I mean, I clearly heard my brother. But my mom, later I found out after I moved away, my mom clearly heard at different times us call out Mom to her, and nobody's there, not one of us is there. And I think it seems like my sister told me that she heard her name get called out. So I didn't like that. I don't like hearing somebody talking to me and especially I thought it was my brother, and there's nobody there, and it's not my brother. I didn't like that.
See, this is one of those moments that I was talking about. I don't recall you telling me that before.
I might not have told you that one because, there's so many. You know what I mean?
That's something that's happened here.
Oh, really?
Yeah, people
Did they say your name too?
I've never heard it. It's never happened to me, but it happened to a friend of mine back whenever we were in high school. I had a couple friends over. They were staying the night here, and one of them went to the bathroom, and the other one was in the living room. And I can't remember where I was. I was off doing something. And whenever I came back, they were both in the living room talking about something, and they're kind of arguing or whatever. And I was like, what's going on? Well, whenever the one went to the bathroom, the other one was sitting there, and he heard someone go into the kitchen and open the cabinet door. And then he claims that other friend yelled for him to come into the kitchen. And he got up and walked into the kitchen, and nobody's there. And he's like kind of looking around. Then my other friend comes out of the bathroom and comes walking down the hallway, not knowing what's going on or anything. And he thought he was, like trying to pull a prank or something. He didn't really understand what was going on. And that's what they were talking about in the living room. And, my other friend that was in the bathroom swears up and down he went to the bathroom. He was never in the kitchen. And then just the other day, and by the other day, I mean yesterday, this is kind of freaky. I didn't even think about it until you said something. So my stepson and his girlfriend came over to visit, and I was talking to my stepdaughter in the kitchen, and my stepson's girlfriend came in the kitchen. She's like, "What do you want? What's going on?" And I was like, we're both just like looking at her like, "What are you talking about?" And she's like, "You just yelled for me. You just yelled my name." And I was like, "No, I didn't." And she's just got like this look on her face, like I'm just sitting there lying to her face. She's not thinking
like
it's
you're
funny.
messing with her.
Yeah, and she's just like, "What do you want? Like you just yelled my name." And I'm like looking at my stepdaughter, and she's like, "No, he didn't. Nobody said your name at all."
Well, somebody did.
Yeah, and I didn't even think about that until now. But yeah, that's happened to a few people here. The only thing I've ever heard is voice-wise was, just the muffled voices like a TV on in the other room or something like that with no TV on in the other room.
I've heard that. And so have I started to say my boys, but not both my boys here at this house. I've heard that. I have actually gotten up thinking that the kids are in the living room. I mean, this has been a few years ago. The kids are in the living room and they are too loud because I got to go to work tomorrow. And they're just talking and they got the TV going. I can hear it. And I've gotten up and walked out to tell them, "You guys turn that TV off. And there's nobody out there." That is freaky.
Yeah.
That happened here.
You had a pretty creepy story about your brother, I believe, that was in the basement, or his room was in the basement or something.
I've got two stories, but of one from one brother and one from the other. So I had two older brothers, and my one that was only 18 months older than me. When he was in high school, if he went out and partied, he would, instead of going upstairs and possibly getting busted, coming up the stairs, making noise, he would go to sleep in the basement. We had a mattress down there because we had kept it down there for the tornado situation in case we need to sleep in the basement or something. And he would sleep down there sometimes. And one Saturday morning, he woke me up and he said, "Did you come in the basement last night?" And I said, "No." And then he went and woke my little brother up and asked him. He said, no, I didn't." And so we're like, "Why?" And he said that in the middle of the night, he woke up, he felt something, he woke up, and he knew somebody was in the bed with him. And for whatever reason, he had a creepy feeling from the very beginning. Instead of immediately thinking that maybe it was one of us or whatever, he was creeped out. And he reached over with his hand and he felt an arm.
Yeah.
And he said it was very, very skinny, like that. All he could think was it had to be one of us. Very, very thin arm. And but he didn't feel in his heart like it was one of us. And it scared him so bad. Once he felt the arm, he laid there, and like we were talking about earlier when we were discussing different things, he pretended like he was asleep, and he could not sleep. And he was so creeped out because he knew there was something not right next to him in the bed. He knew it wasn't us. But the next morning when the sun came up, and the sun finally came up, he got brave enough to jump up. And there was nobody there. And then that's when he ran up and asked us. And he was hoping we'd say yes.
That's so creepy.
But he didn't. Yeah, ugh, yeah, that creeped me out. Then my oldest brother, he would, when he would come home from college, he'd sleep down in that basement. And I didn't hear this story until, okay, this is kind of weird, but after everything in the house, nothing else was happening. So there was a dry period. I hadn't heard a noise, hadn't had anything creepy happen. I kind of got brave enough to talk about it because I used to think that if you talked about it out loud, it would know.
Yeah.
This is so weird. Even if I wasn't at the house.
I don't think it is, though, because that sort of thing happens a lot, and people tend to write it off as, well, it's just your mind playing tricks on you because you're spooking yourself or whatever. But that stuff really does happen whenever you start talking about it, or you're watching a scary movie and you got that kind of atmosphere going on. Something about it. I don't know if it's the energy or what, but it happens way too often to too many people for it just all to be figments of the imagination, in my opinion.
Well, I tended not to talk about it out loud because I was afraid that if it heard me, even if I wasn't at the house, if it heard me, say it followed me or whatever, I didn't know. If it heard me, what if it wanted to scare me? Then it would know that I knew, and it would, I don't even know how to explain it. So I wouldn't talk about it. I didn't tell people much of anything. But one night, my two brothers and I were all in the same car. I don't remember where we'd come from, but my oldest brother was driving us to the house. And I brought it up. I got brave and brought it up. And I just said, have you noticed, first of all, do you guys think the house is haunted? And then they just started telling me stories. Okay. Now I already knew Mark had that experience, my middle brother. I knew he had that experience with the arm thing because he told us. But we really didn't discuss things much other than that, except if we were in the same room and that if we heard the steps come, the footsteps coming up the stairs,
right.
You can't really deny that one. I mean, you both heard it. You were there. But we didn't really talk about things. So I said, did you notice that? So you do think so? Yeah. I've had things happen to me. Have you noticed nothing's been happening lately? Because that's the way it feels to me. And I was afraid to say the words out loud, because if I said that out loud, what if it heard that? And then it says, oh, well, I can do something about that.
I can fix that problem right now.
So my oldest brother told me that, he said, I've known for a long time, because as a matter of fact, he used to hang out in that house before it was our house, because his best friend's family lived in that house before us. Okay. So he started telling me stories about before. I mean, he'd never told me any of that stuff, but he started telling me stories that happened even when he was just hanging out there with the friend. But he said, this is the worst thing that happened to me. And he said, in the basement, I was asleep and I always felt like somebody was watching me, but I woke up and there was this stairway, down into the basement, and the stairway that went down into the basement, his bed was like pretty close to that. And he woke up and he said there was a figure standing there by the staircase at the bottom by the bed, not a few feet from the bed, but he could see it from the bed. And there was a figure standing there, and he said it was glowing kind of a greenish color, and that it was a woman, and she had a bonnet on her head, and she had a long dress like from the 1800s, and she was facing him, but she didn't have a face. He said it was just a blur. The face was a blur, that he could see the bonnet and he could see her dress, and she glowed, and she looked like she must be staring at him because she was facing him. And he freaked out as soon as he realized he was seeing this. He freaked out. He said, I don't even remember exactly what I was saying, but I was saying, go away. Why are you bothering? Why are you here? You need to go away. Leave me alone. Why are you doing this? Or something like that. And she just disappeared. Well, then as we talked about this, I asked him, well, when did that happen? And he told me, and I realized if it seemed like that was about the same time when everything quit, that I hadn't noticed anything in a while.
Mm-hmm.
So, but in my heart, because of the things I had happened to me, I don't think it was just her there. If it was just her, why would everything quit? I don't know, but I don't think it was just her there. I don't think she was the one calling out in my brother's voice, and I don't think it was her. Well, I haven't even told this story. I told you. There was a situation in my bedroom where I was going to bed, and I turned the light out and got into bed. And as soon as I got in bed, I had this bookcase across the room from my bed that had all my, knickknacks, all my prized possessions. And I could hear something moving around. It sounded like moving on the bookcase, like I'm going to make a noise. Can you hear that?
Yeah.
Like this. Like
something
an object moving.
Around.
Yeah. Moving around on the bookcase. And of course, I'd already had many things happen. So I was already freaked out just hearing that. And it kept on moving around. It wasn't continuous, but it would do it ever so often. So I jumped up and ran and told my mom. My mom was in a room close to me on the second floor watching TV. I said, there's something in my room. She said, what do you mean? And I said, well, and I told her, I said, I keep hearing something. There's something moving things around in my bookcase. I mean, how do you tell it? What do you say? I think there's a ghost. I mean, I don't know what. I just told her I heard things moving on my bookcase. Well, what do you mean? Well, there's something in my room, Mom, So she came in there, she looked around, I don't see anything. Everything's cool. She said, it must be a mouse. Okay. All right. It's a mouse. So then she left, went back into the den, and it started happening again. And I jumped up again. I'm like, there is something in there moving things on my bookcase. She came back in there. She looked around again. Then she looks in my closet to see if she can see a mouse. And there's nothing, of course. And she says, I don't know. I'm sure it's nothing. But you just need to go to bed. So she left. So I turned out the light again and got in the bed and pulled the covers up. And, I'm getting afraid by this time because I heard it. She didn't hear it. She didn't hear it at all because it wasn't doing it when she was in there, but I heard it. So I pulled the covers up to my face and I shut my eyes. And then I heard this noise down at the bottom of my bedspread. I swear it sounded just like if somebody took their fingernails, maybe a couple of fingernails. I mean, this is what I saw in my head, hearing it. Was like your index finger and your middle finger, and scraped up the bedspread, scraped up slowly, like it was trying to scare me. Scraped all the way up to like right under my chin almost. And I just thought, oh my God, I just thought, I can't let it know that I hear it. I can't let it know that I hear it. I can't. I just kept my eyes closed. I tried to be as still as I could, but my heart was beating so hard. I'm getting nervous even talking about it right now. It's making me like get tight in my chest thinking about it. My heart was beating so hard. I could hear it in my ears for sure. I felt like I could hear it in my chest. It was beating so hard. And then it just scraped slowly back down, slowly. I just kept my eyes closed. And I just thought, I just can't let it know that I hear it. I can't let it know. And this is the weirdest thing. And I told you this, I can't even believe it happened. Somehow I fell asleep. I don't even know how. How can you go to sleep when something so scary is happening? But I did.
I mean, emotions can exhaust a person. It could be some sort of defense mechanism. It could be shock. It could be a lot of things.
I fell asleep.
You and I have talked about it like that. That was basically my reaction as well whenever I was a kid, was do everything you can to fall asleep. My whole reasoning was the sooner I fall asleep, the sooner it will be morning and this will be over.
And that is true. But I don't know how I did it. But I did.
Yeah, I can't. I was always more afraid to get out of the bed than to stay in the bed with whatever was going on. Sometimes there was a few cases where I just got too frightened and I had to abandon ship. But usually the idea of letting it know, that I was aware of it, or what would happen if I did take off running or jump up and try to turn the light on, was going to be way worse than whatever was actually happening.
Yeah. I didn't want to open my eyes and see something either.
Yeah. Yeah, that was also a big one. You had an incident where you felt like something got in your bed too, didn't you?
Yes. That was the worst thing, okay? That was at that house. And when I say worst, nothing happened to me. Right. I mean, but it scared me so bad that all this accumulatively scared me so bad that I was traumatized all the way into my adulthood. Just a few years ago, several now, but I was traumatized by this, and nothing bad happened to me. It wasn't evil, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It wasn't like demonic stuff happened, but it scared me so bad that I was so traumatized that this was the worst. It was a Saturday. I will never forget it. It was a Saturday. My mom always cooked breakfast on Saturdays, and I was laying in my bed, and I was on the second floor, and I had this bedroom that had these huge, this house was pretty old. It had these huge windows across. I had the best room in the whole house because I had three big windows, and then the corner of the house turned, and I had a half window, but they were very tall. So I had plants in my windows. I had these wind chimes hanging in the windows, and we didn't have any air conditioning. Now, my dad and my mom had window unit in their bedroom, so they had air conditioning, but I didn't. So my windows were always open when it was hot, and so I loved that room. Anyway, I was laying there, and I was just looking out the windows because there was a tree right outside my windows, and I was watching birds. They were, gathering in the tree, and I could hear them singing and everything. So I was just laying there and being lazy, and my mom was cooking, and I could smell it. I could smell bacon. So I'm just laying there kind of waiting for my mom to cook the breakfast. And I was just laying around, and I was turned towards the window, like on my side, on my right side, turned towards the window. And I felt somebody getting on the bed, and it was not a surprise to me. It didn't shock me or anything, because my little brother would, if he knew I was awake and he woke up, he'd come in my room and come get on the bed with me and just hang out till we got up, And so I'm thinking it's him. No, I'm not thinking a thing. Bed moves, nothing. And then it felt like he got back up out of the bed, and then I felt him get back on the bed, and then he got up out of bed, and I turned, and I was turning over, and as I was turning, I was talking. I was going to say something like, I was saying, "Are you getting in or not?" Or something. I don't know. I turned over, and when I turned over, I could see a little boy there, but it wasn't my brother, and he was smaller than my brother. I looked right at him. He was wearing a white T-shirt, blue jean cutoffs, which was pretty popular back in those days. We all did that. We wore shorts that were blue jeans cut off. And he had a blonde burr haircut. And I couldn't tell. Now, this is why I can't promise I saw a ghost. I was very nearsighted, and I didn't have any glasses on, and I didn't have any contacts in. But I don't know what I would have looked at that looked like a little boy wearing a white T-shirt and blue jean cutoffs. But I couldn't see his face clearly, because I didn't have clear eyesight. I was nearsighted. I couldn't see his face clearly. It looked to me like he was looking out the window. I couldn't tell if he was looking at me or looking out the window. But because I was so nearsighted, I, over the years, I've talked myself out of believing.
Yeah.
I saw that, but I saw it. So I saw it at the moment. I saw it. I
Right.
did because I wasn't talking myself out of it. Well, when I saw him, I only looked for like 2 seconds, and then it freaked me out so bad because I knew for some reason, I knew he wasn't, there. Like he wasn't a boy. He wasn't a flesh and blood boy. I turned back over to the other side, thought about it, thought about it. And I had the cover pulled up because I yanked the cover up to me. I'm thinking about what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? And then I felt him getting back on the bed. I felt somebody getting back on the bed. And if you have the cover over you and it's like, say you got the cover pulled under your chin, and if somebody was to have leaned over you and their arm went across you and was tightening the blanket around you because they had their hand pressed
Yeah.
on the, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Can you imagine? Okay, that's what I felt. The blanket went tight across me like somebody had leaned over me and their hand was pressing the cover down. Oh, I just went insane. And I jumped up, and when I jumped up, I didn't feel anything. Okay, I didn't feel. It wasn't like I felt me push a body off me or anything. And I jumped up and ran downstairs, and I can't even really remember going downstairs. I mean, I remember jumping up, and I know I went downstairs. I don't remember myself going down the stairs. I don't remember like running or anything, but I did. And I ran into the kitchen, and I do remember stopping at the kitchen door where my mom was in there cooking, and she said, "What's wrong?" And I didn't know what to say, because it was so taboo to talk about ghosts. And not that my mom didn't believe in ghosts, because I know she did. She told me later, but because my dad was a preacher, it was taboo. I said, and I just told her what happened. And I mean, I didn't have a doubt. I had no doubt that I was asleep dreaming and then dreamed this. But she said, you had to be dreaming. You must not have been awake. It is like it's still morning. You were still in bed. I said, no, Mom, I was not dreaming. I was wide awake, Mom. I was wide awake. And I told her I was looking out the window watching the birds. I was awake. You were cooking. I was smelling bacon. I'm just relaxing. I was not asleep. This was not a dream. I knew for a fact I was not dreaming. But because she told me that, that was when I was like, I think I was about 13 or 14. Because she told me that over the years, I've wondered, well, was she right? Was she right? Was I asleep? No, I could tell you for a fact I was not. I don't know what that's about either. And I know that's self-preservation too. That's
yeah, it's much easier to deal with that. It's easier to deal with that than the reality of what it was.
Because as years go by, you can talk yourself out of anything, really, I think. Or at least halfway.
I mean, I continue to do it.
I do it all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, over the years, I can say, well, that was so long ago. How do I really know? I was so young, whatever. But at the moment, no, there was nobody going to tell me that I was asleep. I knew I wasn't asleep. Ooh, so that traumatized me. And, then again, nothing bad happened. It wasn't bad. It just wasn't supposed to be happening. That's what it is. You're not supposed to have these things happen in your house, in your room.
That's the same feeling in Bigfoot encounters. This thing isn't supposed to be here. It's not supposed to exist. But whether it's Bigfoot, ghosts, UFOs, whatever, so many people are seeing the same things. They're talking about the same things. And I think the more we talk about it, the more it helps. And maybe through all these conversations, eventually we'll start understanding some of it. Or maybe not. Who knows?
I don't know about the understanding, but in talking with other people, and there are other things you can do besides talk to people, which I did, which is go out and explore it, even though it scares the crap out of you. Explore it. When you open up and just say, "Hey, this stuff really is happening. I believe it's really happening. I'm going to go ahead. I'm just going to immerse myself. I'm just going to let it happen." You get to where you find out that I don't know about. I mean, I'm sure there's some people that have had some horrible things happen to them, but not me. It wasn't horrible. It just felt horrible to me. If you just kind of open up and say, "Hey, those are just people. Those ghosts are just people. They're people that are no longer in their body, but they're still people. And most people are probably not terrible people. I mean, some people are, and they're probably terrible ghosts also, because they were terrible people. I don't know. When you die, maybe you get suddenly changed into a good being. I don't know. But probably there are some pretty bad ghosts too. But most of them are probably just normal people, and they died, and they don't know why. A lot of them might not know why they are where they are and that they're dead. Or maybe they do know, and maybe they don't want to go anywhere because they love it. Whatever, they're just people. If you can see it like that, it helps a lot. And I finally got to where I could see it like that,
Yeah.
Just a few years ago. So now when things happen, it doesn't affect me the way it did. And I'm so glad. I'm so glad I don't get traumatized by a person who just doesn't happen to be in their body anymore.
No big deal.
I mean, I kind of feel sorry for them in a way. Why are you hanging around here? I'm sure there's lots better places to be than here.
Yeah, I've definitely heard some horror stories, but I've never experienced anything where I was hurt or nothing was broken or anything. Just real scary. Just really, really scary is all.
Yeah. Can I tell one short one?
You can. The floor is yours.
This is my most important one to me because it happened 2 years ago in this house. 2 years ago, last October.
You want to talk about the smiling man, don't you?
Yes.
All right. I didn't know if you wanted to bring that up or not.
I do, because
Okay.
I like him. I mean, that's what I'm talking about. He didn't scare me. If it had happened years ago, he would have scared the crap out of me, even if he did smile, just because he's a ghost. So I was wide awake. I will not make it into a long, drawn-out one. I was wide awake, watching TV with my boyfriend. We're sitting on the couch, and it was night, and we had the lights out. And I don't even remember what we were watching because now, once this happened, who cared what I was watching? But it wasn't something scary, so it wasn't like I was in a mood for a ghost or anything like that, or didn't have myself psyched up for that. But you know how you can see something move. I have really good peripheral vision. I think I can see things off to the side really well. I saw something move. I thought I did. I mean, it just kind of, I saw it. I didn't think about it. I just saw something move, turned my head to the left, and I saw something. And I just looked at it again, and it was what I thought I saw. I saw a face looking right back at me. I didn't even make a noise. My boyfriend's still sitting over here watching TV. I didn't even make a noise. I just looked at it, looked again, and there was a guy looking at me. And he wasn't glowing, okay? So you hear glowing, like my brother said he saw this glowing green woman. He was not glowing, but he wasn't quite... I could see through him a little bit, but at the moment, I didn't even think of that. All I looked at his face. He's looking right back at me. And it only lasted for like this long. So I look, 2, 3. He kind of smiled a little bit, just a little bit, 4, He started walking. He took a couple of steps to my left, and there was an opening between my couch on the left that went into the dining room and into the kitchen. There's no wall behind my couch. He walked past me. I turned and looked around behind me, and I'm doing it right now because I've seen it. I'm seeing it right now. I turned and looked, and he was not there anymore. I turned back, and I think I must have turned and looked over my shoulder. I don't know how many times. Several times I looked again to see if I could see him again. He was not there. I turned back. So I'm thinking, okay, he's gone. But at least I can't see him. I'm sitting there. My boyfriend's still sitting there watching TV. He didn't even notice me turning or anything.
Just an oblivious man.
Yes. And I was thinking, I've got to tell him. I've got to tell him this. Because I haven't seen anything since that little boy at my house when I was a little kid, when I was young, 13 or whatever. I'm thinking, I got to tell him. I've got to tell him this. But if I tell him, he's just going to have that blank look on his face like, yes. But he never is rude to me about it. He listens to me, but he doesn't really make comments, okay? So I knew he was going to do that, and I knew it was going to piss me off. But I turned and looked at him, and I said, I've got to tell you something. And he looked at me. What? I said, I just saw something. I just saw a ghost. And he just looked at me. And I just started crying because I said, I knew you were going to do that. And he's just looking at me like, what? What did I do? I knew you were going to look at me like that. But I'm telling you, I'm telling you, I just saw something so amazing. And you're just looking at me. But it really did happen. I saw a ghost. So then I tell him all about it. And then I realized that ghost kind of looked like him. A little bit, not like him. It wasn't like exactly like him. I said, you know what? As a matter of fact, he kind of looked like you. And then I thought, well, of course, a ghost shows up. I see a ghost, and it's not even anybody coming to see me. He's probably coming to see him because it's probably one of his relatives. I'm thinking that really is, that's not even fair. If I'm going to see the ghost, it should be somebody coming to see me. But I told him he actually could like be your brother or something. And he didn't have a brother, but he kind of looked like him. So, once you see a ghost, and I saw him clear. He was kind of see-through, but I could see him. It was no imagination. It wasn't a maybe thing. He was there. He looked right at me. And once you see one, it's just, you can't quit talking about it. Like, I don't know, I couldn't. Like, ever so often I'd bring it up again. So one day I brought it up again. We were coming home from grocery shopping or whatever. I don't remember. We'd been to Lowe's, I know that. And because we had some stuff we had to take to the backyard. So that we were talking about it, and I said, and I'm discussing what he looked like. And I said, you know what, as a matter of fact, and we start walking in the house. I said, he looked a lot like you look in this picture in here, this one on the wall. And I walked around and showed him the picture. It was when he was a teenager, him and his friend and his two sisters. They put on those outfits you put on, like you go to the state fair and you can put on these like cowboy outfits or whatever, and you get your picture made. So they were all dressed up like saloon. The girls looked like saloon girls. They had guns and hats and stuff, and they were kind of like Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid is what they look like. So we got this picture on the wall there, and it said like that. That's what he looked like, a lot like that, but not exactly, but a lot like that right there. Then we walked out in the backyard, and we took our Lowe's products out to the backyard, and we went all the way to the back of the yard and put the products down where I was going to use them. And something crashed, and we both heard this crash, and it came from the direction of the house, but I couldn't tell if it was, I thought it was outside the house at first. Well, I still had the sliding glass door open there. So I looked around, and there was nothing outside. I didn't see anything that could have fallen or anything. So I walked through the back sliding glass door, and that picture that I had just pointed at before we went outside was laying on the floor. So it had fallen off the wall, was laying on the floor, and it was, I'm not going to say it looked like somebody threw it. You know, you hear stories, oh, they threw it 5 feet away. But it was like, it was on the floor a couple of feet away or so. I picked it up and I examined it, and it was not broken. I mean, it was with glass and everything, and it wasn't broken. And I looked at it, and the thing that you hang on the nail was still there. And I looked up at the wall, and the nail was still in the wall. And I felt the nail, and the nail was secure. It wasn't wobbly or anything. So I just picked it up, and I looked at all that, and I looked at my boyfriend. He looked at me, and he looked at that picture, and we just kind of looked at each other for a second. And, I just pointed that picture out. So I just hung it back on the wall, and we kind of looked at each other and walked back out into the backyard. And we discussed that about 100 times since then, but that's my story.
Well, Beth, I appreciate it. Many conversations to come, I'm afraid. We got lots of notes to compare.
Oh, I got one more. Just one more.
No, you're good. You're good. I've enjoyed it. I appreciate you coming on and sharing everything.
I enjoyed it too.
And if you've experienced something you can't explain, maybe you've seen a Bigfoot or maybe you've seen a ghost, email me at bigfootcrossroads@gmail.com. Check out the website, bigfootcrossroads.com. You can find the links to the social media, contact information, all the past episodes, link to the merch store, everything you need, all in one place. And until next time, remember, there's something in the woods.